You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
This week on Only Malware in the Building.
I'm going to make a note of that and share it with my detection team that they should all put cloves in their USB drive, cloves of garlic.
I mean, it couldn't hurt.
I just upgraded my modem, Dave, so I don't want to hear any crap about how slow I am on this particular episode.
We sound impulsively brilliant.
Even malware has multiple names for the same type of malware. You have to keep them straight.
Do we understand the circumstances of how it just fell off the radar?
Only if you'll share your dips, Dave.
No, I'm sorry.
Welcome in. You've entered Only Malware in the Building. Join us each month to sip tea and solve mysteries about today's most interesting threats. I'm your host, Selena Larson, Proofpoint threat researcher. Being a security researcher is a bit like being a detective. You gather clues, analyze the evidence, and consult the experts to solve the cyber puzzle. Inspired by Mabel Mora and the residents of New York's exclusive Upper West Side residence, I, alongside N2K Network's Dave Bittner and Rick Howard, uncover the stories behind notable cyber attacks.
This September 18th and 19th in Denver, a tight community of leading experts is gathering to tackle the toughest cybersecurity challenges we face. It's happening at MWise, the unique conference built by practitioners for practitioners. Brought to you by Mandiant, now part of Google Cloud, MWise features one-to-one access with industry experts and fresh insights into the topics that matter most, right now, to frontline practitioners. Register early and save at mwise.io/cyberwire. That's mwise.io/cyberwire.
Today, we're talking about the curious case of the missing IcedID. IcedID is a malware originally classified as a banking trojan and first observed in 2017. It also acts as a loader for other malware, including ransomware, and was a favored payload used by multiple cybercriminal threat actors until the fall of 2023. Then it all but disappeared. In its place, a new threat crawled, Latrodectus. Named after a spider, this new malware, created by the same people as IcedID, is now poised to take over where IcedID melted off.
I'm a little bit grossed out about all this. First IcedID, NRT that you mentioned at the top of the show. Does that mean there's a spider in the cup also? Oh my God.
No, but I highly recommend not Googling this malware name, especially if you have a fear of spiders like I do.
I'm sorry. I was just enjoying a delicious dip. Selena, I want to apologize that Rick and I were both late to this recording session. We were waiting for Rick's dial-up to connect.
I just upgraded my modem, Dave, so I don't want to hear any crap about how slow I am on this particular episode.
Sure. Okay. Absolutely.
Guys, we have to be cool. Think about our audience.
Well, let's start out, talking about IcedID. So what is IcedID, and how did it originally emerge into the cybersecurity landscape?
IcedID has been around. Like I mentioned, it was initially classified as a banking malware. It was first observed in 2017. It was really part of that banking Trojan family. There was this era of cybercrime where you had things like Bursnif, IcedID, Latrodectus all came on scene that were classified as banking malware. They were going after banking credentials, real money. And then it started acting as a loader for other malware, including ransomware. It was used by multiple prominent initial access brokers. So essentially those threat actors that are trying to gain access to compromise a system and then deliver ransomware. Emotet, for example, was seen delivering IcedID.
Can I just pause and say that the reason I love cybersecurity is that all the cool names that we come up with to describe all this stuff. I mean, you rattled off of maybe 9 different malware names, right? That is on the tip of the tongue of everybody. And that's the reason I'm here. Okay, Selena.
You know what? I feel like it has gone slightly overboard, though. It's hard to keep them all in my head. There's just so many, and the names are so chaotic.
Yeah, I wish there was one organization that could take responsibility for being the defining name, because every malware actor has half a dozen different names. And very often it is my job to say them all and keep them straight, right? Which is not easy.
Well, even IcedID was AKA Botbot in the early days. So there's even malware has multiple names for the same type of malware. You have to keep them straight.
Sounds like a robot chicken.
Yeah. What I love about it, though, is, we have malware names and we have hacker names. We have hacker group names. And sometimes they're the same names, right? And then it's like, talk about getting confused. Okay, I have no idea what we're talking about most of the time.
Oh, Rick, Rick, you don't give yourself enough credit. Selena, I think that it is safe to say that Rick is a security genius. Not particularly true, but safe.
Hey, I am in the presence of greatness right now.
Oh, stop. Go on.
Please, tell me more. Tell me more.
Yeah. Only if you'll share your dips, Dave.
Okay. No, I'm sorry.
It's not enough.
Well, you obviously haven't read my contract. There'll be no sharing of the dips. So, all right. So we've talked about IcedID. So what happened to IcedID? Do we understand the circumstances of how it just fell off the radar?
That's a very good question. So it was pretty prominent, and back in early 2023, we actually saw a new variant of IcedID called IcedID Lite. It kind of removed some of the functionality of the initial type of malware. So we thought that continuing development, going all in on this type of malware. And then in the fall, it really just sort of stopped appearing in campaign data. We were asking ourselves at Proofpoint, fellow researchers being like, hey, what's going on? Because the actors that use IcedID, these initial access brokers, they're still active. And it coincided, the fall of IcedID sort of coincided with, in November 2023, this, new malware that kind of came on the scene. And initially people thought it was another new variant of IcedID. But great, this is interesting. But it turned out to be something completely different. It was Latrodectus, but suspected to be developed by the same folks who created IcedID. So this top dog of initial access malware that had been used for so long just sort of disappeared, and in its place rose Latrodectus.
Did Latrodectus have some sort of significant upgrade to it that caused them to abandon the other one? Or, it seems weird that we just take something that was working and go to something different.
Great question. Not really. And actually, if you ask my colleague Pim Truerbach, who did all of the malware reversing on Latrodectus, he thinks it's a little basic. He's not very impressed
Wow.
with this particular malware. He would like the threat actors to try a little bit harder.
Oh, don't say that.
To make things more fun for him.
Yeah, let's taunt them, Selena. That would be great for all of us.
You're right. I know.
So Latrodectus is the version of me dialing up to the internet with my modem? Is that what you're telling me?
I don't know if it's quite that, because it's still a payload that's used by initial access brokers, right? Like, we're still seeing it being used by threat actors, although not as much as IcedID, which is kind of interesting. IcedID was really up there, like with Qbot, right? Like, you had these sort of, frequent highly regarded malwares, highly used malwares that typically led to ransomware. I mean, IcedID we saw like throughout its life cycle leading to Maze, Sodano, Kiwi, Egregor. The DFIR report just published a couple of posts recently about it going to Nokoyawa, Dragon Locker ransomware. So, it was really kind of a key component in many, many ransomware attacks. So it was kind of interesting that, it just sort of like fell off the landscape. And Latrodectus came back. We only see it with a couple of our threat actors, but it's still like, you're still trying to figure out like what comes next. IcedID was so prominent, and then it just kind of disappeared. And now we're all kind of seeing like, okay, what's going on?
The IT world used to be simpler. You only had to secure and manage environments that you controlled. Then came new technologies and new ways to work. Now, employees, apps, and networks are everywhere. This means poor visibility, security gaps, and added risk. That's why Cloudflare created the first-ever connectivity cloud. Visit cloudflare.com to protect your business everywhere you do business.
This is all coinciding with just chaotic vibes of e-crime landscape. So there's a lot of outstanding questions, I feel like, in general.
Right. So, I mean, sometimes we talk about maybe there's internal strife among the team that could have been working on IcedID. And so a handful of them break off and decided to do this new thing. Or sometimes they'll try to throw law enforcement off the trail and they'll say, oh, look, we're not them anymore. This is a completely new group. I mean, do we have any indications of what might have been prompting this name change, or is it still just a mystery?
As far as we know, it's still just a mystery. I do think that you bring up a very good point, though, when you're talking about... Don't
encourage him, Selena. I mean, come on. He thinks he's the Edward R. Murrow of malware, okay? Come on. It's not that important.
Selena, don't listen to him. For him, virus protection includes garlic and a wooden stake.
And it has been effective ever since. I'm just saying.
Okay. As we were saying, Selena, before we were so rudely interrupted.
I'm going to make a note of that and share it with my detection team that they should all put cloves in their USB drive, cloves of garlic.
I mean, it couldn't hurt.
Just in case. Taking lessons from the older folks, how we used to combat malware back in the day.
Speak for yourself, Selena. Speak for yourself.
But no, I mean, I think that is a good point if we think about the characters who are in the cybercrime landscape. And there is kind of drama and strife often. I think the Conti leaks was a great example of showing how, different threat actors interact with each other, how they're kind of oftentimes in like a business hierarchy. They have people working on HR. They have, complaints about fellow employees. And with the fracturing of Conti kind of splintering into these different groups. And so, IcedID is kind of, part of that overall cinematic universe of ransomware cybercrime. And they're a little bit, I would love to see like a Real Housewives of cybercrime.
Wait, that's a different show. That's a completely different show.
You're right. That's next season. Sorry.
Yeah. Get the FBI on the line.
Yeah, to figure out, what is the motivation? How do they react to things? What, just hearing the gossip and, all of the why decisions are made, I think.
I'm still confused about why Proofpoint has linked the two pieces of malware together, the IcedID and the Latrodectus. Is there common code elements there, or it looks like the same kind of coding style? I mean, what's the thing that links it together?
Yeah, so there are characteristics within the malware itself that points to an overlap. There's also infrastructure overlap with historic IcedID operations. And so when we were taking a look at this new Latrodectus, in fact, it looked so similar to IcedID that initial analysis thought Latrodectus was a new variant of the IcedID malware. And so there was a lot of discussion on various, socials and stuff about, what is this malware? What's going on? And so we were able to, within doing some analysis and being able to kind of find and highlight, some of those links. There was some, like, for example, some sort of sophistication involved, right? They had various sandbox evasion functionality, different encryption styles, but fundamentally we were able to see, some of those links. But what we don't see, while the links exist in the malware, it hasn't reached the level of IcedID operations, historic IcedID operations, and what we've seen from that malware and operators of that malware. So it hasn't like one-to-one replaced it. And so it's still kind of an open question, like where does this go from here? And is this even going to continue to be successful, or is there going to be a pivot to something completely different? Like we've seen, with the Qbot disruption, meaning threat actors have to use something completely new. So yeah, it's still kind of an open question.
Attention all security professionals. Want real-time IP intelligence at your fingertips? Sign up for Scout Insight's free trial today. Get immediate insights into threats, search any IP with no training required, and enjoy intuitive graphical results. Whether you need to identify compromised hosts or enrich Splunk queries, Scout Insight has you covered. Don't wait. Accelerate your threat response now. Visit teamcumry.com/cyberwire to start your free trial. When you think about Latrodectus and its place in the malware ecosystem, how serious a threat is this, and how much energy should folks be putting in to protect themselves against it?
Well, I like to think that, there's various tiers in my mind. And again, this is just, how I think about things in terms of the types of threat actors. And if we have threat actors that are initial access brokers that are using something new, it's definitely worth paying attention to, because initial access brokers are the ones that are responsible for some of the most damaging cybercrime attacks, ransomware that, costs hundreds of millions of dollars. And, there's the malware that you have to think about and thinking about defense for the actual, like on network defense, but there's also thinking about the lead up to it, the initial access. And so sort of this idea of defense in depth to prevent not just the installation of potentially Latrodectus, but any other malware that threat actors that are initial access brokers are going to be using. Because Latrodectus is just one, right? We have seen, for example, with the Qbot disruption, Picobot being, kind of that replacement. And so there's, the malware might change, but if we're looking at initial access brokers, their experimentation, their sophistication, all of that they're doing to just try and compromise organizations, it's always worth paying attention to when they use something new.
So what's the main takeaway here, Selena? I mean, is there common protections for Latrodectus, or does it mean something specific if you see that kind of thing in your environment?
So I would say that with Latrodectus in particular, I have to say the community has really come together to do a lot of really great research into this particular malware. Proofpoint actually published a blog in collaboration with Team Cumry looking at this particular malware and its infrastructure, and that was pretty interesting to see a lot of some of the overlap with historic IcedID operations. But when there is something like an initial access type of malware that is identified, that's always something that should be sort of like a high priority, investigation. Like as we've seen historically, certainly with IcedID, things like Qbot, the access to ultimate ransomware delivery, the relationship is there. And I think the DFIR report recently came out with an example of an IcedID infection with the time to ransomware being 29 days. It's the whole cycle and the activity is there. There's going to be likely, especially if we're talking about initial access brokers, there's going to be, the initial malware delivery, there's going to be data exfiltration, there's going to be lateral movement. They're going to try and, spread themselves as much as they can before actually leading to ultimate encryption. So, yeah, I think the jury's still out on what does Latrodectus mean, but it's a great example of the continued experimentation of initial access brokers, the continued use of new tools, new resources, trying to adopt new techniques to see what works best. And they're always out there trying to compromise computers and make as much money as possible.
Well, Selena, thank you for sharing all of this information with us. We are excited to be part of Only Malware in the Building. Rick and I, we do have to run. We are meeting up later today to play a exciting game of Pong together. So
I believe I'm ahead, Dave. I believe I'm ahead.
Well, right. But before we do, we both need a nap. So thanks so much. And we will see you here next month.
Thanks, you guys. I'm very much looking forward to it. And thanks to you, all our listeners, for tuning in to Only Malware in the Building.